The sweetest guy in music, according to Tony Bennett. Frank Sinatra and Lady Gaga were among the artists he collaborated with. Behind those happy pictures, however, lurked a sinister secret. For decades, he harbored animosity toward a single vocalist who tormented him every day. Not even his best pals knew the truth. Bennett eventually spoke up in 2021, when he was close to passing away. This went beyond jealousy on the job. This was bitter, personal, and had been kept under wraps for more than half a century. August 3, 1926, saw the birth of Anthony Dominic Benedetto at St. John's Hospital in Long Island City, Queens. A minor but significant shift for an Italian immigrant family that had historically relied on home births was that this was the first time anyone in his family had been born in a hospital. His parents were seeking a better life in Italy. However, poverty and ongoing hardship were what they discovered in New York. Coal stoves in their cramped, chilly Astoria apartment were barely keeping them warm. Tony subsequently recalled that there was no certainty of a hot supper back then, and food was never certain. Though his health was precarious, Tony's father put in a lot of overtime as a grocer in Astoria. He had a severe heart ailment from years of work and poverty. Additionally, without life insurance, the family was greatly affected by every failure. Neighbors were aware of the Benedettos' tenacity, but they also witnessed how John's illness and ongoing financial needs kept the family on the verge of disintegration. When Tony was only 10 years old, tragedy struck in 1936. When John Benedetto passed away at the age of 50, Anna was left to take care of Tony, his brother, and his older sister Mary. John Jr. The city was already tense due to the Great Depression, and the family was now facing even more extreme hardship. Working long hours and earning little money, Anna secured a job as a seamstress in a sweatshop, stitching piece after piece. Rent was a continual source of concern, and Tony remembered instances in which the landlord had threatened to evict them or had seized their furnishings due to non-payment. They adopted soup kitchens as a weekly ritual. Even though his father's passing was heartbreaking, Tony never lost the humility and compassion it bestowed upon him. In the same year, Tony had an incident that demonstrated the remarkable nature of his skill. On July 11, 1936, he was selected to perform at the Triborough Bridge's opening when he was 10 years old. One of the major accomplishments of the city was the $60 million bridge that linked 3 boroughs of New York. Mayor Fiorello LaGuardia himself was among the audience members who heard the youngsters sing while standing on a huge platform. He was even given a pat on the head by the mayor afterwards. That moment, which Tony would never forget, demonstrated that his voice could lift him above the challenges of everyday life. When he was 13, he started working to support his family. He started working as a singing waiter at Italian eateries in Long Island City and Queens. He served spaghetti in pizza plates while wearing a faded white blazer, and then he sang for the patrons. His voice quickly became the talk of the neighborhood since it was rich and controlled even at that age. Every note he sung helped put bread and milk on the table at home, despite the fact that his admirers believed he was only a gifted youngster. "Those restaurants taught me more about people and music than anywhere else," Tony added later. The encounter taught him humility in the face of adversity and influenced his natural conversational approach. Early on, Tony's creative side was also evident. The School of Industrial Art in Manhattan, which is renowned for molding up-and-coming artists, accepted him. He was well known as the class caricaturist at PS 141 even before high school, drawing teachers and classmates with a keen eye. His desired job at the School of Industrial Art was to work as a commercial artist. He refined his discipline and increased his passion for art in Manhattan, where he was surrounded by creative energy. He later acknowledged that those years had an impact on both his painting and his approach to music. However, dreams had to wait. To support his family, Tony left school at the age of 16. Later, he worked as an elevator operator and supermarket clerk after landing a job at the Associated Press as a copyboy. Despite the low pay, every dollar was important. He never stopped singing in spite of the hardship. In local theaters and clubs, he gave amateur performances, stoking a passion that hardship was unable to quench. Tony was 18 years old when he was inducted into the U.S. Army in 1944. He fought in Germany and France with the 63rd Infantry Division in the last phases of World War II. He experienced fighting personally, and the war was horrific. He provided soldiers who were experiencing the horror with little moments of solace by singing with military bands when he could. He was permanently impacted by the Battle of the Bulge. Almost 19,000 American soldiers lost their lives, and Tony saw friends perish and villages decimated. He recalled the icy evenings spent in foxholes and the ongoing anxiety of being encircled by German soldiers. Because of these encounters, he became a lifetime supporter of justice and peace. The GI Bill allowed Tony to pursue music seriously after the war. Mimi Spear, a vocal coach, was his instructor at the American Theater Wing School. She gave me one piece of advice that completely changed my life. She advised him to study instrumentalists instead of singers. Drawing inspiration from jazz greats such as Art Tatum and Billie Holiday, Tony honed his unique approach. Greenwich Village's smoky clubs were teeming with music in 1949, but few could have predicted that a single, little stage would give rise to a legend. Night after night, Anthony Dominic Benedetto, who went by Joe Barry, was battling through sets in the hopes of a seemingly distant chance. Then, just by happenstance, Pearl Bailey entered the Village Inn. Her warmth and strength had already made her a star. And she listened intently to his singing. She was cold-blooded by his mood and wording. She made a decision that altered his life that very evening. He was given the opportunity to begin her show, putting him in front of a crowd that would finally see what she had in him. It was not only a gesture of goodwill but also a brave move considering how polarized the post-war entertainment industry was. Not only did Pearl Bailey share her platform, but she also introduced him to influential people through her contacts. A series of events that would eventually lead him to Bob Hope were started by that one night. Shortly after Bailey gave his support, Bob Hope himself sneaked into a nightclub where Bennett was performing. Hope had the ability to create or ruin careers as one of the most well-known entertainers in America. Bennett recalled afterward that he gave the performance his all without knowing who was watching. Hope did something strange at the end of the set. He entered backstage. "You have something really unique," Hope said the young singer. "I will invite you to appear on my show." Seldom did performers ever hear that promise. And that was when everything changed for Bennett. Hope asked him to open the Paramount Theater in New York, where such legendary performers as Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby had played. For a young vocalist just starting out in local clubs, it was like entering the past. Hope had one last proposal before that Paramount premiere. The name Joe Barry wouldn't work, he informed him. For the marquee, his full name, Anthony Benedetto, was too lengthy. Hope immediately proposed something brief, something that would stick in people's minds: Tony Bennett. Despite being straightforward, the modification had significant impact. The new brand created opportunities in a field where a name means everything. Later on, Bennett would claim that Bob Hope was responsible for both that name and the career it allowed him. Late 1949's Paramount shows turned out to be the real turning point. Bennett needed to swiftly learn how to deal with the kind of audiences that used to spark Sinatra riots, as thousands of admirers crowded the theater. While acknowledging that it was frightening, he also claimed that those evenings taught him how to manage a performance, pace himself, and dominate a room. As a result of the publicity, record labels started to take notice of him. Not too long afterward, Columbia Records called. When he signed with the company in 1950, he became one of the biggest music performers. Bennett developed his own distinctive style with producer Mitch Miller's help. Miller, he reportedly claimed, taught him to sing with full passion instead of merely melody, to concentrate on each note and phrase. Bennett started working with Columbia at their studio on 7th Avenue, where they would collaborate for almost 60 years. This resulted in 50 million recordings sold worldwide, including more than 70 albums. Because of You, released in 1951, was the first major breakthrough. It debuted in April and gradually rose through the charts, peaking at number 1 on July 14. This incredible run, which lasted for 10 weeks, made Bennett a household name. He received a gold disc as a result of the song selling over 1 million copies, and putting him on television and starting a flurry of tours. Critics praised Bennett for bringing back the beloved pop ballad at a time when other genres were gaining popularity, and audiences responded favorably to its authenticity. In the same year, Bennett recorded Hank Williams's Cold, Cold Heart, demonstrating his flexibility. Although it was practically unheard of, the New York pop singer's rendition of a country classic was impressive. Gold. Over 1 million copies were sold, and it remained at the top of the charts for 6 weeks. Hank Williams himself gave the recording high marks, claiming it introduced his music to previously unheard audiences. Bennett demonstrated that music has the power to transcend cultural boundaries and bring people together with that song. The song that would define Bennett for decades was then released in 1953. Rags to Riches spent 8 weeks at the top of the charts when it shot to the top on October 24. Its triumphant and hopeful lyrics resonated with the post-war American mood, and audiences welcomed it as an anthem of the American ideal. After selling over 2 million copies, the song cemented its place in popular culture by making appearances in movies like The Godfather and Goodfellas. Even after several decades, Bennett acknowledged that it was the song that fans asked for the most. Bennett's remarkable 24 singles in the top 40 by 1965 were unmatched by many. Blue Velvet, Just in Time, and Stranger in Paradise were among the songs that maintained him at the top of the charts year after year. Bennett's When Joanna Loved Me hit the charts in 1964, even when the Beatles were ruling American music, demonstrating his ability to weather shifting trends. He gave the straightforward explanation that his success stemmed from his love of singing songs that people remembered, which was sufficient to keep him at the top. The work that Tony Bennett did with jazz greats was revolutionary. In the mid-1950s, he began recording with Count Basie, abandoning the polished, safe pop style that had brought him fame. The meetings with Stan Getz were particularly audacious. Getz was initially opposed to performing with a pop vocalist, but after hearing Bennett improvise during rehearsal, his opinion changed. The music industry was further stunned by the partnership with Art Blakey's Jazz Messengers. Although many thought Bennett's beautiful voice and Blakey's hard bop style would never mesh, the two produced some of the most avant-garde jazz voices of the time. One of the best cornet players, Bobby Hackett, once remarked that Bennett was the only pop vocalist who could swing like an instrument rather than merely singing over the band. These initiatives went beyond simple trials. In the sake of artistic, they represented a radical change that jeopardized his financial success. He put out an album titled The Beat of My Heart in 1957. In spite of Columbia Records' warnings, it was his method of escaping the mainstream music industry. The record included jazz drumming titans Joe Jones, Chico Hamilton, and Art Blakey, each of whom contributed a unique sound. The authentic vitality of jazz was captured by recording the sessions live with minimal overdubs. It was first written off by critics as being too experimental. Its sales were low. In the first year, only 50,000 copies were sold. However, its impact exceeded the figures by a wide margin. Broadway's Lullaby, which was practically unheard of at the time, was strewn throughout one of the band's tracks. Frank Sinatra subsequently praised the album, acknowledging that it taught him how to swing. Basie Swings was recorded by Bennett and Count Basie in 1958, a year later. Bennett performs music. Bennett was too attractive for his hard-swinging ensemble, according to Basie, who first refused to do it. That changed on a night at Birdland in New York when Bennett joined the orchestra and hit Pennies from Heaven with such force that the entire club was in a state of shock. With a full 16-piece band, the album was produced in just 3 days that January. In the first track, Jeepers Creepers, Bennett and the horn section engaged in a light-hearted back-and-forth that had never been tried on a commercial recording. More than 250,000 copies were sold in its first year, making it an enormous hit. Bennett created new tunes as the tape rolled, rewriting several of the vocal arrangements during the sessions, according to studio recordings. Discovered years later. This was the only vocal album, Basie acknowledged, where he believed the singer was genuinely a member of his band. Then came the song that would become the hallmark of his career. Bennett recorded I Left My Heart in San Francisco on January 23, 1962, at Columbia's 30th Street studio. It had almost slipped his mind. For 8 months, the song had been on his piano after he deemed it too sentimental. He had laryngitis when he arrived for the session and was hardly able to speak. His voice was so strained that the orchestra had to drop the key twice. In just 2 takes, however, he gave a performance that made the song famous. His voice that day was raspy, which contributed to its emotional depth. The record spent 36 weeks on the charts after peaking at number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100. It earned him his first gold record in 1963 and sold over 1 million copies. Record of the Year, a unique distinction for a song with jazz influences at the time, was one of its 2 Grammy Awards. It was chosen as San Francisco's official theme music in 1969. Bennett's fortunes, however, soon shifted along with the music industry. A new era began with the Beatles' entrance in 1964. As rock music took over the radio, Bennett was pressured by Columbia Records to change. Tony Sings the Great Hits of Today, which he grudgingly published in 1970, had a psychedelic album cover that went against his persona and Beatles covers. The initiative failed miserably. Just capturing it made him feel physically sick, he acknowledged. Rock fans didn't care. His devoted followers detested it, and he found himself torn between 2 worlds. His record-breaking sales suddenly plummeted. In a world that cried out for something different, his personal life was just as chaotic as his sound. Bennett wed Patricia Beach, a 19-year-old art student, in 1952. Outside, a strange scene was created by the wedding at St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York. 2,000 women were grieving as though at a funeral, clad in black and wearing veils. There were soon 2 sons. Day in 1955 and Danny in 1954. But Patricia felt alone because Bennett was often traveling. They were married for 13 years before divorcing in 1965. His 4-year-old affair with actress Sandra Grant was the reason Patricia sought for divorce in 1969, further escalating the scandal. Bennett wed Sandra the same December in 1971, the year the divorce was finalized. His fans were astonished by the abrupt change, and his reputation as a clean-cut crooner was permanently changed. When he quit Columbia Records in 1972 following a sour argument, things became worse. He ended a 20-year collaboration with them by refusing their requests for additional rock covers. Before choosing to launch his own label, Improv, in 1975, he released just 2 albums while working as a temporary recording artist for MGM's Verve subsidiary. The label failed by 1977 as a result of inadequate distribution and financial issues, despite the fact that he released 5 albums, including collaborations with Bill Evans. Bennett had no recording deal for the first time. His financial situation fell apart. He was heavily indebted after the improv industry collapsed, and his Los Angeles lifestyle with Sandra was much more than his dwindling salary could sustain. He had a lot of overdue taxes by 1977, and the IRS was threatening to take his house. On Thanksgiving night of that year, when he was getting ready to sing at the Fairmont Hotel in San Francisco, his mother, Anna, passed away. Cocaine became his escape from the terrible depression brought on by the loss. He almost died from his drug habit, Sandra subsequently disclosed. He had diminished to a shadow by the late 1970s. Performing in Las Vegas at tiny concerts in order to make ends meet. Bennett's near death in 1979 was horrifying. He took a bath and overdosed on cocaine because he was so overwhelmed by debt, sadness, and addiction. He was unconscious when Sandra discovered him in the overflowing tub. She rushed him to the hospital after performing chest compressions and successfully reviving him. According to his later account of the event, which he called a near-death encounter, he saw a golden light that brought him serenity. He thought it was divine intervention when he woke up, a sign that he had been granted another chance. It turned out to be the pivotal moment that drove him to give up narcotics entirely and strive for a recovery. Tony Bennett had his lowest point of his career in 1979. He was drowning in debt at the age of 53 and almost died from a drug overdose. He owing the IRS $2 million in overdue taxes, and they threatened to seize his home. He stated, "Look, I'm lost here," to his sons Danny and Day in a desperate attempt to get help. Apparently, no one wants to listen to my music. Danny and Day had been in a failing rock band named Quacky Duck, which is what made the call so shocking. As well as his companions from the barnyard. They were the last people anyone would think would salvage a legendary singer, at least on paper. Although he lacked a musical voice, Danny soon discovered that he had a keen business sense. Additionally, his father lacked business acumen despite having the talent. Danny started reducing spending right away and relocated Tony back to New York. The beginning of one of the biggest comebacks in entertainment history would be that choice. Danny's strategy for his father's career was audacious and unexpected. Instead of following the latest fashions, he helped Tony break out from the stale Las Vegas image. By booking him at small theaters and colleges, he was able to reach younger audiences who had never seen a live performance of American standards. Danny returned his father to Columbia Records in 1986, the same label that had released him in 1971. This time, however, Tony was in complete creative control. The Art of Excellence, the debut album from this deal, became his first charting album since 1972. Additionally, Danny arranged partnerships with unanticipated groups, such as rock groups like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, which led to the discovery of whole new markets. The IRS debt was settled in full by 1990, and Tony Bennett's career was back on track. Tony continued to pursue his love of jazz despite his difficulties in the 1970s. The Tony Bennett Bill Evans CD was released in 1975, when he collaborated extensively with pianist Bill Evans. A side of Bennett that few had before witnessed was revealed on the album, as Evans' nuanced playing brought out some of Tony's most contemplative and elegant performances. They recorded together once more because they had such a great bond. 1977, despite their lack of popularity at the time, critics commended these sessions for their intimacy and honesty. Even though they were not given much credit at the time, Bennett's collaborations with jazz luminaries like George Barnes and Ruby Braff would turn out to be some of his best. At the age of 68, Bennett shocked the music industry in 1994 when he made an appearance on MTV's Unplugged. Not traditional crooners, but grunge and alternative bands were the show's hallmarks. However, the show's second highest rated episode ever was the performance. With over 1 million copies sold, the live album achieved platinum status and took home the 1995 Grammy Award for Album of the Year. It was only the fourth live record to receive that distinction. During the event, there were some noteworthy duets with K.D. Costello and Lang. Bennett's unvarnished voice brilliantly encapsulated the essence of the performance when he encouraged the crowd to do this without a microphone. Beyond the stage, Bennett's private life took an unexpected turn. He wed Susan Crowe, who was 40 years his junior, in 2007. It was like fate that they connected. Her parents had been introduced to him in the 1960s, while Susan was being carried by her mother. When she was 19 and he was almost 60, they first crossed paths at a performance in the 1980s. She went on to become president of his fan club, and on June 21, 2007, they were married in a secret ceremony in New York after 20 years of courting. Susan was 48 years old and Bennett was 81 years old. Although it had been difficult to overlook the age difference at first, he acknowledged that they quickly discovered they had so many things in common that it didn't matter. After he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, she took care of him and stayed by his side until his last years. Bennett released Duets, an American classic, in 2006, the year he turned 80. The album sold over 202,000 copies in its first week of release and debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200. Paul McCartney, Barbra Streisand, Elton John, Bono, Tim McGraw, Stevie Wonder, and Billy Joel were all on the record. Bennett and his partners recorded every song in person, unlike many duet albums. The CD demonstrated how American standards might still be successful in today's music industry. Duets de Vierzien sur Saint Island was published by Bennett in 2011, 5 years later. He made history at the age of 85 by becoming the oldest living performer to debut at the top of the Billboard 200. In its first week of release, the album sold 179,000 copies and featured performances by Lady Gaga, Mariah Carey, Norah Jones, John Mayer, Aretha Franklin, Carrie Underwood, and Amy Winehouse in a posthumous duet. Their rendition of Body and Soul was incredibly poignant, and it was Winehouse's last recording before she passed away. Danny referred to the album's success as historic, demonstrating that his father's creative abilities had never diminished. Lady Gaga and Bennett collaborated once more on Cheek to Cheek in 2014. He sold 131,000 copies of his record in its first week, earning him another #1 album at the age of 88. The project featured many jazz standards by composers such as George Gershwin and Cole Porter. Their tour and the Cheek to Cheek live PBS special became cultural events, and the Lincoln Center performance was the first to be streamed in 4K. With 2 number 1 hits on the Jazz Digital Songs list, the album demonstrated jazz's continued relevance in the contemporary era. 20 Grammy Awards were given to Bennett during his career, including the 2001 Lifetime Achievement Award. He was the only performer to win a Grammy in 50 years, beginning with I Left My Heart in San Francisco in 1962 and ending with his final Grammy in 2022 at the age of 95. The album that won for Best Traditional Pop Vocals was Love for Sale, his second collaboration with Lady Gaga. Contrary to industry expectations about age, the majority of his Grammy Awards occurred after he turned 60. In Astoria, Queens, where Tony was raised, he and Susan established the Frank Sinatra School of the Arts in 1999. With 250 pupils when it first started in 2001, the school relocated to a permanent location in 2009. With top-notch amenities like dance and art studios and a 750-seat concert hall, it has maintained outstanding graduation rates. The school came to represent Bennett's conviction that a good arts education might transform the lives of children. The public was informed in 2021 that Bennett had received an Alzheimer's diagnosis in 2016. His family had kept the revelation a secret for 5 years. His physicians were amazed at how well he was able to conduct 90-minute concerts in spite of his sickness. Bennett struggled with object recognition, but his musical recall was still strong, according to his physician. Later, Lady Gaga disclosed that, despite the fact that Martin Scorsese had utilized his music in masterpieces like Goodfellas, he had always disapproved of the way Italians were portrayed in his movies. In the same year, Bennett, then 95 years old, released his last album, Love for Sale. Cole Porter became the oldest person in history to release an album of new songs, and it was in homage to him. The 59 years between that album and his first top 10 release in 1962 set a new record, and the album debuted at number 8 on the Billboard 200. Despite her illness, Lady Gaga was moved to tears during the emotional sessions as she witnessed her friend's strong vocals. Tony Bennett died quietly in Manhattan on July 21, 2023, at the age of 96. Only 2 weeks remain until his 97th birthday. He had won 19 competitive Grammys, sold over 50 million records, and released over 70 albums, the majority of which came later in life. From his earliest years as a singing waiter in Queens until his last appearances in 2021, his family recalled him as a man who always got pleasure from singing. He was hailed by the Alzheimer's Association as a champion for the cause, pointing out that his voice and spirit continued to inspire people even in his latter years.